Hello everyone, no one of consequence here, back again with a new video. This is episode 87 in a series which recounts my ongoing Dungeons & Dragons campaign, which is now in its 11th year. So as always, spoiler alert, in this video I will be revealing details found in this adventure module. And moving on, here is the player character roster for the Descent into the Depths campaign. We have 8 characters being controlled by 5 different players. And here are the NPCs currently traveling with the party. We have the character's 2 guard dogs who have been along for the entire campaign, and there is also Poppy, a freed slave of House Ileserve, and Elmas, a unicorn who had been held captive in the House Ileserve Zoo. Where we left off last time, the characters were fleeing back down the stairs to the ground floor of the Great Fane of Loth. They had tried to explore the second story, but they immediately stirred up a crowd of female Drow guards and their leaders. Varys had tried to calm the situation by identifying himself as the liberator of Loth. However, the other characters ignored Varys and kept fighting with the Drow until the party was in danger of being overwhelmed by sheer numbers. After reaching the ground floor, the characters ran towards the shrine dedicated to Loth. They concluded that the painting of a portal behind Loth's image must be the way to her home plane. In fact, they could see smoke from nearby braziers being gently drawn to the painting and actually disappearing into it. You will recall the reason the characters were trying to reach Loth's home plane in the Abyss is because the Mind Flayer Sage had told them that they would have to travel there to destroy the elemental keys they carried and banish the Elder Elemental God forever. So, still under the effects of Thorol's haste spell, the characters all began running towards the presumed portal. Now, this illustration from the module shows how the huge image of Loth appears to the characters. It is suspended in mid-air and is contained within an amber-colored column of light. Gorbadoc ran up to the portal first and tried jumping in, but he just bounced off it and fell to the floor. Then, for reasons known only to himself, Varys sprinkled some elf root onto each of the smoldering braziers, filling the air with its smoke. The sounds of the pursuing Drow were now echoing down the stairway and growing louder. So Thorol cast another wall of ice to block off this chamber and buy the party some time. Meanwhile, Garrett, Gorbadoc, and the Sergeant Major began searching around the floating image of Loth, thinking that it may hold the key to entering the portal. Finding nothing obvious, everyone returned back to the portal. Suddenly, Gorbadoc and Garrett were drawn into the portal, appearing smaller and smaller and further away until they completely disappeared. Aramis and Thorol thought that the smoke coming from the braziers might be the key, and so began immersing themselves in it. Aramis then tried jumping into the portal, but he just bounced off of it. At this point, the Sergeant Major began shouting that he had solved the mystery. The key to entering the portal was to first enter the column of light illuminating Loth's floating image. So Aramis and Thorol ran back and stood in the light column for a moment. They then leapt into the portal while the rest of the party entered the light column. Nio, being a cleric of St. Cuthbert, was extremely reluctant to do this. However, she did it so as not to be left behind. Poppy and the unicorn followed her example. The sergeant major waited while everyone else entered the portal. Then he, who had already been in the light column, jumped in behind them, and without a moment to spare either, because the pursuing Drow had now reached the ground floor and were working at battering down Thorol's wall of ice. And with that, we end the Descent into the Depths of the Earth portion of the campaign and move on to the next chapter. We start with components taken from this AD&D adventure module, Q1, Queen of the Demonwood Pits. And as always, spoiler alert, I will now be revealing details found in this adventure module. After passing through the portal, the characters found themselves in a corridor of sorts. The floor seemed to be made of a web-like material, which gave slightly to the weight of their footsteps. The walls and ceilings were not solid, but consisted of swirling, billowing mists, which could not be seen through. Additionally, there were no visible sources of light, but everything was illuminated by a soft, indistinct glow. But most disturbingly, the two clerics in the party suddenly realized that they were now cut off from their chosen deity. While in the abyss, they would not be able to commune with their gods through prayer. In practical terms, this meant that they could still utilize the spell slots, which they had currently prayed for. However, once cast, they would not be able to reacquire that spell slot until they left the abyss and returned to their home plane, where they could once again pray to their deities. Not knowing where to go from here, the characters simply began walking along the corridor. They soon came to a doorway of sorts, but it was filled with a glowing green mist instead of holding a normal door. The characters began stepping through it and found that it just led to another corridor, exactly like the first one. Continuing on, the characters came to a T intersection and another green mist-filled doorway. The invisible Gorbadoc stepped through, quickly followed by Aramis and Thorol. They then found themselves in an impossibly small room packed with trolls. Gorbadoc was not seen and thus not attacked, but Aramis and Thorol were immediately grabbed up by the trolls and thrown deeper into the room. Gorb quickly jumped back through the portal, but Aramis and Thorol had to fight and dodge their way back to it. The characters arrived back out into the corridor and quickly told the others what had happened. Almost immediately, trolls began appearing from the portal and in the corridor as well. So, the fighter-type characters advanced and began engaging them in melee. The first trolls to appear were quickly cut down, but others continued to arrive in the corridor to replace them. As individual trolls were defeated, Niobe and the Sergeant Major began setting fire to their bodies so that they would not regenerate and rise again. Meanwhile, Gorbadoc had disappeared around a corner off to the west. Not that the other characters actually knew this, because he was, of course, still invisible. All they knew was that he had not reappeared to help battle the trolls. Finally, the last of the trolls emerged through the portal and were soon defeated. The corridor was now filled with the stench of burning troll flesh. With the battle concluded, Gorbadoc suddenly returned. Although the other characters still could not see him, they could hear his voice. Following the sound of his voice, the other characters set out to continue exploring the so-called demon web. Alright, well that's all I have for now. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. If you can, leave a comment, let me know what you think. If you haven't yet, please subscribe to the channel. And if you know of a good place, please share the video. And anything you can do to help support the channel, I appreciate it. Thanks again. Bye for now.
The greatest adventure is what